Oh, you know what? I wanted just 1 second. Give me a minute over here. Give me a minute. I just want to see what the audio settings are over here. Very good. Okay. All right. Here's a speech by Lubavitcher Rebbe, which is given in 1951, and some of it is from 1958, but 1951. So this is right when the Rebbe assumed the leadership. So here he's laying down some of the very basic principles of Chabad Hasidut that he wants to to use to bring the redemption, to bring Moshiach, to change the whole world, to make the world a good place. The world will be the way the Creator wants. And we're going to see how this is reflected in our Torah portion. In Torah, this is in Yiddish. In Torah Bechlal, in Torah in general, let me make this a little bit bigger over here. 1 second. In Torah in general, and in and in the written Torah, in other words, the 5 books of Moses especially, is yeder vort, every word, unafila yeder os, and even every letter, bediuk, exact. When ois gerechnet, and it is, how do you say, calculated. In other words, who wrote the Torah? God. So every single letter is very exact and precise. Now, how God wrote a book, you can ask a question. That's a good question. That's really a good question. The answer is, I got a better question. How can God create all the world? He creates all the bugs and all the animals, and each one has a respiratory system and a circulatory system. And there's like billions, trillions, who knows how many billions, trillions to the trillionth power of bugs and amoebas and whatever it is, protozoas or whatever they're called. And that's only in the world, but in the sea. And then what about in the stars? That's only physical. What about the spiritual? So God creates all these details, and all the details come from the Torah. The Torah is the blueprint of the world. So every single letter. But on the other hand, God wants us to understand the Torah. The Torah is many, many dimensional, dimensional. And the lowest dimension, if you want to call it the Torah, is what to actually do, what we're supposed to do. And deeper than that is how we're supposed to feel. So that the Torah is giving us the direction. Okay, so there's a lot of laws therein which are which are learned from Einzige Wörter, from just a few words, or afilu from Einzige Oisos, even just a couple of letters of the Torah. From Dosveg, and nevertheless, verit in the Parshios, there are in these Torah portions Vayakel and Pekude, a rein gechazert de ois firliche Beschreibung from the Kli Mishkan. In Vayakel and Pekudi, this week's Torah, these 2 Torah portions we learned last week and this week, this is a repetition of what we already learned before in Truma and Tetzaveh. So we have 5 Torah portions in the end of the book of Exodus. 5 Torah portions. The last 2 are a repetition of the first 2. And the middle one talks about the second tablets, Moses breaking the tablets, and the sin of the golden calf. So that's like a break between the 2. But the fact of the matter is that the last 2 of these 5 Torah portions is almost exactly word for word. It contains the same exact words as the first 2 did, talking about the temple and the garments. Every letter and every word is so important that how can we repeat so many words? They're already written in Parshas, the previous Torah portions, Truma and Tetzaveh. In Plug, at first glance, the Torah Gekant zogen. Bekitzer, the Torah could have just said quickly, right, and very economically, as the Yidden, that the Jewish people had gemacht. They actually did. They made the vessels of the tabernacle and the garments of the high priest. Vide Eibishter, like God wanted to. Unazoi, a room, and by means of this, they could have saved tens and tens of sentences and paragraphs. So is the Torah being economical or not? Yes, every letter is very exact. So why such a tremendous repetition? It seems to be a big waste. Says the Rebbe, of course, is not a waste. So we have to understand, why did God repeat it? The reason was that a lot of laws stay in Nishpa Firish are not written clearly in the Torah. Men darvze uplearn, we have to learn from Aina Osis, just from a few letters, is Vibald, because as men can Vazen the halachas, we can know the laws for an Abriker word from just one little word or one little seemingly extra letter. Adra os in the Torah is oib ze volten stehen befirush. If the law would say explicitly, right, with all the explanations of the law, right, if you can learn the law out from one letter, then why should God write it in a whole big sentence? He's just wasting letters and time. If that there would be extra words in the Torah. Therefore, the Torah is economical, to amazingly so, to the degree that God can learn a whole entire law from one word, from one letter. Why doesn't he explain it? Because if you can learn it from one letter, so why explain? Why make all the explanations? God doesn't want to waste words. This is the reason why there's a lot of laws which are said in the Mishnah only. Stay in the Mishnah, and they're only learned from a little sort of they're said in the Mishnah. I'm sorry, with a very how do you say, very short and just a few words in the Mishnah, and in the Gemara there's several pages just to explain what the Mishnah was talking about. The room, because Mishnah is oib mitzad dem signon from diuk lashon HaMishnah, as can men uplearn. We can learn from the exact terse language of the Mishnah. We can learn all the laws from just a little hint, as Voltzer Stein beferish. So excuse me. Therefore, if they would say all of the laws, and then there would be extra words. When a zoy is also in the Gemara regarding the Rishonim, and the Rishonim regarding the Achronim, the laws that we learn in the Shulchan Aruch, if you look to see where the sources are, so the sources are mentioned in the Talmud, and the sources as they are in the Talmud, there's a lot of argument going back and forth. And that argument comes from just a couple of words in the Mishnah. And the couple of words in the Mishnah come from just a couple of letters from the Torah. So why not just cut out the Torah and cut out the Mishnah, just have all the big explanations? It says no, because the holiness of the Torah is directly from God. And in that holiness, it's like a seed, right? It's almost like saying, why plant seeds? Let's just have fields of orchards without planting seeds. You can't do that. The seed is but on the other hand, if the seed is so essential, why have seeds at all? Why doesn't God just make trees? Why just make it finished? The same thing with the Torah. Why not just give this finished product? This is because there's a whole process. And the process is God wants everything to be very exact. The holiness of the Torah is very, very concentrated. And in the Mishnah, it's also holy, but a little less concentrated. It's spread out a little more. And the Talmud is also holy, but it's a little bit less. It's spread out even more. But nevertheless, what do we see? That the words in the Torah are as exact and as, how do you say, there's a better word than economical, but I can't think of it, as possible. As Loitem, according to this, is the question is even worse than we said before. If every letter is exact and God does not want to put in one extra letter in the Torah, then how can it possibly be that God put two extra Torah portions repeating laws that were in Truma Tzava, and he repeats those laws again over here? What did it add? We knew it before. Why add it? In Plug is Dr. Gansen, the whole entire writing of the Mishkan, Maisa Mishkan, in Parshas V'Yakel Pekudei is Yeter Devorim. It's unnecessary and it's extra words, and God did everything in the world, everything possible, not to put in extra words, and then he put in two extra chapters of the Torah. Why? So obviously God did not make a mistake, and God did not contradict himself. There must be a tremendously, tremendously important lesson to us in day-to-day life from the fact that God not only did he repeat letters, but he repeated whole entire chapters of the Torah. The answer is like this: is oif dem zelbitz, the same answer as we had regarding the enlicha kasha, a similar question. For was zainen ibrga chazir, what is repeated? The korbanos from the Nesim in Parshas Nosai, 12 mol mit alapratim. In Parshas Nosai, which that's near the beginning of the book of Numbers, as it relates on the opening days of the tabernacle in the desert. The tabernacle in the desert was open for business. They started bringing actual sacrifices on the first day of Nisan, but it wasn't open for the general public. It was open, but not for the general public. The first of all, there had to be 12 days of inauguration. Each tribe brought special sacrifices for the inauguration of the temple. Each one brought special sacrifices. And you would think maybe each one brought something different, because each tribe was different. Each tribe had a different nature to them. So one of them you figure would bring, what type of sacrifice? No, the fact of the matter is they brought exactly the same thing. And not only that, the Torah repeats over 12 times exactly the same thing. It says on the first day they brought the tribe of Yehuda. And what did he bring? Karat Kesef Echad, Shloshim V'Shtayim. Exactly the same thing is repeated 12 times. Why in the world would the Torah repeat the same thing 12 times? Just say there's 12 tribes. Each one brought as follows. And just say what it was one time. Why do you have to repeat it over 12 times? In Plug, Hatoch Kikent could have just said the name of each tribe, Nasi, as Eret Gebrach, that he brought the same thing as the previous one. Say what the first one brought. Yehuda was the first one to bring, and say the second one brought the same thing, and the third one brought the same thing. And the answer is, why does the Torah, if it's so important to save words and to be exact, why did it so much repetition? So the answer is that the repetition is very, very necessary. It's very necessary. As Eder Nasi, that each one of the heads of the tribes had by Zay Korban, by their sacrifice, Upketan under Zachi, did different things. They did the same thing, but they accomplished something different. Andaram Shachas, different blessings were drawn down. BC's removed was like it's hinted at in the Midrash Parshas Nosai. It's hinted, there's a Midrash also says that each one was something different, and each one accomplished something different by doing the same thing. And therefore, it can't say in the Torah as hat gebracht azoy vida fried. It couldn't say that each one brought the same thing, because in fact, even though physically they brought the same thing, but in fact, what they accomplished was totally different. Because Yeder Einer, each and every one, he drew down a different blessing into the world. Al-Dirach says similarly also, we can also answer the question that we have over here by Yakel Pekudei. These two Torah portions that we read last week and this week, there were repetitions, seemingly, there are repetitions saying the same thing as Truma and Tetzaveh, exactly the same words. Right? The first one talks about the vessels in the temple, and the tabernacle and the building of the tabernacle itself. The second one talks about the garments of the priests and repeats the same thing. But the fact of the matter is, yes, externally it seems to be the same. But really, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was the Eibishter, what God had gesagt, said to Moses, wie wird beschreiben, like it is written in Parshas Truma and Tetzaveh. That's what in Truma Tetzaveh, that's what God told Moses, is their Mishkan was the Yidden, and I'm sorry, and the Mishkan, the tabernacle which the Jews had actually built, Loitem Vert, Loitem Vert that sailed, which is written in Vayakal Pekudim, Zayin and Meramas are hinted at two different Bezundra Mishkanot, two different tabernacles. Mishkan Lamata, Mishkan Lamaila. The two Torah portions, Truma and Tetzaveh, which talked about building the tabernacle and the garments and the vessels, that's talking about what God told Moses. That was the spiritual tabernacle. And what's talked about in these two portions, which seems to be a repetition, it's not a repetition. That's the physical one. And therefore, everything is mentioned twice. Uberpratius individual, the Kliya Mishkan, the vessels of the tabernacle, und Levushi Kohuna, wie sie seinen, like they are zu erst, which they are for the first time. 1 minute. So if so, in Truma and Tetzaveh, this is talking about the tabernacle and the vessels in the tabernacle and the garments. That's talking about, there's a big difference. Though in Truma Tetzaveh, that came from God. And it was given only to Moses. Moshe Rabbeinu was the mile, which this is especially, is in three things. Number one, Shomea Mekabel Adibur. Number one, who received, who was being spoken to? Moses. Moses, it says, was a soul of Atzilut. Moshe wasn't a normal human being in any way. Moshe was a totally different human being than any other human being in the world. Thus, this means, as Zaindik Dalamata, even when he was here in the world, is Ergaven, he was like an Olam Atzilus Mamash. He was like pure godliness when he was in the world. Unvi der Maimer, like to say, Shechina Metaberes B'toch Korono, like it says that God's words came through Moses' mouth. Right, the Torah has 5 books, right? The 5th book of the Torah is only Moses speaking. Moses speaking. It doesn't say that God spoke to Moses. Moses said, and everyone knew that what Moses said is just exactly as holy as when God spoke the 10 Commandments. Every word, because it wasn't Moses speaking, it was God speaking. That's the last book of the Torah. And that gave power to all the prophets afterwards. But Moshe was a totally different person. Pure godliness, pure truth. It says, Moshe emes v'Torah to emet. Chach ala neshamas, even the fact is that all the Jewish souls, they all come from Atzilut. The word Atzilut is another word for holy. Holy temple, because it was revealed there, Atzilut. The Torah is holy because it's revealed Atzilut. The Jewish people are called holy, right? Am Kadosh, because they're revealed Atzilut. That's another name, a Kabbalistic name for being holy, godliness. Really, everything, all these things are revealed. The whole world is revealed, God is godliness. No, it says no, it's godliness, but it's not revealed. This is nor the Zayin Shorish. This is the source. The source of the Jewish souls comes from Atzilus, the source of the Torah. The Kegan, the Shamas of Atzilus, but the souls of Atzilus, like Moses, this means as Oich Lamata, even when the Moshe is below in this world, Zayin and Zayin, Dar Madriga, their level is from Atzilut. Chachas is Faran because there's a difference between the souls, Biz, the Kalim Atzilus, until the vessels of Atzilus, and like it says in Agiras HaKodesh, it says in the Tanya, the second to the last book of the Tanya, there's 5 books of the Tanya, is Shekavar Yatsu, Venifradu Me'akelim, there are souls which are come from Atzilus, but they've been separated from their source. So they're different. So the vessels and the lights are different. Says Vasdas Gate off. This is talking about the souls of Atzilus, but nevertheless, Moshe seinen sei noch als der Medrega from Atzilus. Moshe, even when he came into the world good, he was a human being and he was a person. So it wasn't pure godliness revealed. But nevertheless, it was an aspect of pure godliness revealed. That was Moses. So in Vayakel, in Truma and Tetzaveh, which we learned 5 weeks ago and 4 weeks ago, right? Those two Torah portions are talking about God speaking to Moses. And these two Torah portions are Moses speaking to the Jewish people. So let's talk about the first two. The receiver. Over there on the first two Torah portions that we talked about weeks ago, that's the receiver was Moshe. Moshe was pure. What he received was pure. Number two, the way that Moshe received the commandment about the tabernacle, he received was the Dibur, and was in Nevuah, prophecy. But he received prophecy not like everybody else. Lo kam navi od Israel. There was never another prophecy like Moses. Moshe received the prophecy standing up, and he didn't have to lose his personality or his character. He didn't have to become a different person in order to receive prophecy. That was Moses. He was always attached to the Creator. The lines were always open. Das Gufa is Zayin Faran Svei Pratim. And this is also Moses. He said he stood up when he received the prophecy. And number two, Moses' prophecy was a higher level. It says that Moses, when he would prophesy to the Jewish people, he would say, this is what God said. Zeh hadavar. And all the other prophets, when they would prophesy Isaiah, Ezekiel, as high as they would say, ko, like this is what God said. So Moses' prophecy was, first of all, clearer, and it was from a higher level. As by all the Nevi'im, by all of the other prophets, Zayin Gashmi is the goof, their physical body, confused them, even from the revelation of ko, like this. But by Moses, it wasn't that way. Moshe, his Ein Zayin Guf, even when he was in his physical body, he was a vessel, even to this level of Zeh, a higher aspect of God. This is what God said. This is exactly what God said. And so to speak, it says that God spoke to Moshe face to face. So if we see that in Truma and Tetzaveh, when God was speaking to Moses, as first of all, who was speaking? God was speaking directly. Who received it? Moshe. How was he receiving? Directly from God. Number three, another difference, the place. Where did Moses receive his directions about the tabernacle, which we read about weeks ago? The place was on Mount Sinai, which Mount Sinai is Moshe Gishtan, and Moses was, or if a Hechra Madriga, he was a higher level. Then he was when he was in the physical world. In other words, it wasn't the tabernacle that was talked about weeks ago that God gave to Moses. This was, first of all, directly from God. Moses was tremendously pure, and it wasn't really in the world. It was on Mount Sinai. There, everything was tremendously poor. There was no distractions. There was no what's the proof that Mount Sinai is higher? Dorton there says Moses didn't even eat anything or drink anything. Broit is there nitge essen. He didn't eat bread and he didn't drink any water. Why didn't he drink water and eat bread for 40 days? Chach as euch nachdem Moshe, even after Moses came down from the mountain, is sein Essen und Trinken, he ate and he drank. Gewen anders was different by everyone else. Why? From them all, everyone else is verstandlich, it's understood. As a Zoe Mishkan, that such a Mishkan is gemacht, was nit for Gashmis to gold. It wasn't made, when God said make the temple, that tabernacle from gold and silver, what he was talking about up there on Mount Sinai, it wasn't talking about physical gold and silver. But the Kli Mikdash, the vessels of the temple, in Levushia Kahuna and the garments, and the way God said it. And our two portions, Vayakel Pekude, they were totally different. Zain and Gemach, they were made, first of all, not by God to Moses, that Moses was pure. This is Moses who was receiving in these two portions the commandments that were said weeks ago. The Jews. The Jews are not as holy as Moses. Was Rov and Neshamas, the majority of the Jewish souls, they come from Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya. And also it was physical in the physical world, not on Mount Sinai. We didn't receive the commandments. We received down here. And Zav, Kesev, and Nechoshes, physical gold, silver, and copper. Okay, so what's the Rebbe saying? Again, our question is, a few weeks ago, we learned the exact same thing as we're learning these 2 weeks. The building of the tabernacle and the garments, the vessels in the tabernacle, the garments, and it repeats it over here. Same thing these week, 2 portions. Isn't it a big waste of words? Says the Rebbe, no. Back then, it's talking about what God gave to Moses, which that's very important. God spoke to Moses. There's a holy temple, a pure tabernacle that's spiritual, that has nothing to do with the physical world. The physical world can't destroy it, can't. And this week's Torah portion is talking about what Moses said to the Jews. Very physical, very mundane, much lower level, made from actual physical gold and silver, etc. From deswegen, nevertheless, nicht geguckt, notwithstanding the tremendous difference between the tabernacle that God commanded to Moses weeks ago, right in the 2 portions weeks ago, which that's the tabernacle potential, spiritual. And this week's Torah are talking about the tabernacle actually physical. Is when there's their tachlis, when is completed the ultimate purpose of the world, of the whole business. When was that the whole purpose? And in other words, why not just leave it spiritual? What's wrong with that? Leave it spiritual, be up there spiritual, the spiritual holy temple. And if you spiritualize yourself and purify yourself, then maybe you can get to this level. And it says, no. The main, what God really wanted was Haratzon from the Rebbe, when is fulfilled what God said, I will dwell inside of you. What did God say? Make me a holy temple and I will dwell inside of you. I will dwell inside of them. When is this? Right? That's how the commandment to Moses is. When God was talking about the spiritual tabernacle, God said, let them make a tabernacle and I will dwell within them. When is that? Back then, when God commanded it, the spiritual one, right? It says wrong. Davke and Gashmis Mishkan, only in the physical tabernacle from Vayakel Pekudim that we're reading about this week. Unit in Ruchnis, not the spiritual Mishkan from the Hares of Ahar, what you saw on the mountain. Via Zokt and Midrash, like it says over in the Midrash. Varum, because Nisava Kodesh Baruch Hu, God wants to be here in this physical world. Und via Zokt, like it says in the Tanya. Gaitis Oifen Olamas, that's talking about this physical world, that there's nothing lower than it. In simple English, what it means is we have no idea how amazing, miraculous, holy, blessed is this physical world, and every detail in this physical world, and every moment that we live in this physical world, much higher than heaven, much higher than the highest heavenly worlds. And what's the proof? God, when he commanded Moses to build a tabernacle, he was talking about the spiritual tabernacle, right? Spiritual tabernacle. And everyone is the spiritual tabernacle waiting for us in heaven to be with the Lord. That's a spiritual tabernacle. That's the main thing, is to go. Says the Rebbe, no, not so. And that's what it's coming to tell us. That the spiritual tabernacle, as holy as it is, and as close to the Lord as it is, and as spiritual it is, as it is, and as truthful as it is, and etc., that's not it. That's not it. God wants it to be in this physical world where there's sins and there's problems and there's doubts and the temple can be destroyed. Even though that is physical, un achumri, and even more, it's material, mundane. Und therefore, nach is dort achoshech. There's a darkness. Afterwards, there can be a darkness, doubled and redoubled. Wie state reckoned, like it says in the Pratios in the Tanya, with the darkness that occurred after the God destroyed the temple. We're in exile, like we learned just in Likuti Torah and Torah Or. From deswegen, nevertheless, un mitzad them, because of this, feared zich ois the tachlis, the whole purpose of the creation and why God is making the world at all is only in this physical world. And so to speak, that gives God pleasure. Thermit, with this, we can best understand, we can also understand the question which is asked about the Avanim Tovos, was the Nesiim haben gebracht for an Beis Hamikdash. We can ask the question about the precious stones that each one of the tribes, the heads of the tribes, brought for the Holy Temple. The stones that were put in the breastplate of the high priest, each tribe had his own stone. Diamonds and rubies and sapphires and carbuncles, whatever. Vibal is given, Maisa Nisim. It says that there were miracles. It says that the Nesiim, the word for Nesiim means the leaders of the tribes, but Nesiim also means clouds. It says they were brought by clouds. Nesiim means clouds. It says that these stones on the breastplate, they were brought in a miraculous way by clouds. So the question is, 1 second, the tabernacle, and in fact, all the commandments are supposed to be done with actual physical things. And if there was miracles, the same question is asked also by Hanukkah. Also, if there was a miracle with the oil, maybe that was not good for the miracle of Hanukkah. The same thing over here. It says that the oil burned. Where did the oil come from? The 7 days. There was enough for 1 day. It lasted for 8 days. So the 7 days was a miracle. How did they light it? You can't do a commandment with things that are from heaven. Torah is not from heaven, it's from earth. How did they do it? So that question is answered. Here's the same question. It says that the stones that were in the breastplate, they came in a miraculous way. Therefore, how can you use the miraculous stones they came from heaven to make the garments of the high priest? The ganze Tachlis, but the whole purpose of the Mishkan and the Mikdash is menza machen. You have to make from physical things. Es darf doch das nicht sein kein Meister. It can't be a miracle. So there's an answer. Nor in Yanim versus Arangan and Teva, only in nature. So that's the question. The answer is not so important to us. What the answer is. The thing is, the questions that are asked. How could they use these things? Everything in the temple, all of the Jews have to be natural. So that's what the Rebbe is saying. That answers why it has to be written twice over the commandment in theory, in spiritual. That's in the two Torah portions we learned weeks ago. And these Torah portions that seem to be a repetition, they're not a repetition. It's talking about actual happening in the physical world. And that's the main thing that has to be brought into the physical world. And then physical world things can be used to give the purpose that God created the world for, namely, that there should be a dwelling for God in this physical world. That's okay. What are we going to learn from this? What can we learn from this? Is as mizol by sich nit herabgefallen. Don't become depressed. Trachendik saying, as wie kommt man ton? How can we do a thing from Ratzon Elyon umakaven sein to the Makavan Elyona b'shas men veist? How can you possibly do what God wants and be exact when you know veist in vos far what type of a 1 second. Matzav mishtate. I know how low I am. I know what type of thoughts I have, what type of desires. I'm going to serve God. As men und bechlal gefindt men sich Doch in Choshech, we're in darkness, doubled and redoubled. From the bitter gullus, from the deepest exile. Darfer zich betrachten. So a person can say, listen, I just finished doing an Avera. I want to do more Averas. I'm interested in, I'm not really relevant to these things, putting on tefillin and doing Shabbos. Maybe other people. I'm too low. You don't know where I'm at. Says the Rebbe, oh yeah? You have to understand, as nit cooking, notwithstanding that fact, as Zok the Rebbe that God said, as oy mi is nor nadiv lev, that if you just have a generous heart, thus haste, this means, as mituta zach, that you do with a Jewish warmness, un hartzika, with your heart, is doch v'shachanti betocham, I will dwell within you. God gave the first tabernacle, was talking about the Moses, who was pure. Moses said, this is not what God wants. God wants it to be given to Jews, physical Jews in the world. Jews that had just finished worshiping the golden calf, and Moses had to pray for them. Oh, those are the Jews that have to make the temple. So therefore you can learn from this. Don't think that, oh yeah, I'm so low, I'm going to do a commandment, I'm going to keep Shabbos, I'm going to learn Torah. What are you talking about? It's not for me. It says you're right, it's not for you. It's from God, and it's specially for you, and you're much holier than you think you are. And that you did bad things, that's in the past. Forget about that. That's who God wants to receive the Torah. People just exactly like you. They're Eibishter helped, and God helps. Always fearing to take us out and to conduct us, help us, that we'll have the proper intentions and we'll do it. Do what God wants. So therefore, there's two tabernacles, and the main one is in this physical world for people like you and me. Simple people in the world that are normal people. We have normal desires and normal egos and normal this. And this is what God wants. That's what God wants. Because when you do something holy, it shows you who you really are. It shows you who you really are. As we're going to continue, God willing, tomorrow, we're talking about the two tabernacles. The one tabernacle, the spiritual one, and the physical one. And now we'll learn the Devar Malchut. No, it doesn't work. The Yom Yom.